Good morning, I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. In today's update, breaking news, a Minneapolis judge has granted a motion to reinstate third-degree murder charges against Derek Chauvin, the former police officer accused of killing George Floyd. Chauvin already faced charges of second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. Jury selection for his trial enters its third day today with 5 jurors already selected. The trial is expected to begin on March 29. Merrick Garland is now officially sworn in as U.S. Attorney General and has reported for his first day on the job. Just a little while ago, Garland gave his first address at the Department of Justice, promising fairness, impartiality, and equal justice for all.
I, too, know that this department has and always has had such dedicated people. I am honored to work with you once again. Together, we will show the American people by word and deed that the Department of Justice pursues equal justice and adheres to the rule of law.
Garland is a former prosecutor and federal judge, most famous for being nominated to the Supreme Court by President Obama, but never confirmed. He takes over a Justice Department faced with domestic terror, extremist threats, and a reckoning over civil rights. President Biden will make his first primetime address tonight, marking the one-year anniversary since COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. The address follows the official passing of Biden's nearly $2 trillion COVID relief package. The bill includes $1,400 stimulus checks for millions of Americans, enhanced unemployment benefits, and funding for vaccines and reopening schools. This is President Biden's first major legislative win since taking office. He's expected to sign the bill into law tomorrow. And 1 year ago today, the world changed forever. The NBA became the first U.S. sports league to suspend its season, and then President Trump suspended travel to the U.S. from Europe. Now, nearly 1 in 4 U.S. adults have gotten at least 1 dose of the COVID vaccine, and the White House announced it is purchasing another 100 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson single-shot vaccine. Whit Johnson has the latest.
This morning, the vaccine rollout ramping up with eligibility expanding. Alaska becoming the first state to offer vaccinations to anyone 16 and up. Vermont taking a similar step, but only for those with high-risk conditions. Many Alaskans already signing up for their first shot.
Just excited to continue moving forward.
Oh, my God.
And in Oklahoma, Aiden Ashwood hugged by his newly vaccinated grandparents for the first time in a year. The White House purchasing another 100 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson single-shot vaccine. Most won't be delivered until later in the year, but could be held for children if approved, or possible booster shots.
I'm doing this because in this wartime efforts, we need maximum flexibility. There's always a chance that we'll encounter unexpected challenges.
President Biden already promising to have enough vaccine for American adults by the end of May. Many states told to expect a flood in supply by April, when experts say up to 24 million vaccines could be distributed weekly nationwide, compared to 18.5 million this week. George spoke to Dr. Anthony Fauci about the vaccine effort earlier this morning.
We should have enough vaccines for every adult American by May. What's the biggest obstacle to actually getting those vaccines administered?
Well, one of them is vaccine hesitancy. We want to make sure that people who have concern about it, that we articulate to them why it's so important for them, their families, and the community in general to get vaccinated, because you want to get the overwhelming majority of people vaccinated.
And the list of states easing restrictions keeps growing. New York, New Jersey, and Maryland all preparing to relax rules on restaurants and businesses. And Wyoming is now the latest state to drop its mask mandate despite warnings from health officials. Diane?
Whit Johnson at Jones Beach vaccination site here in New York. Whit, thank you. And while the pandemic has changed life all over the world, it hasn't affected everyone equally. Now, Melinda Gates, co-founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, is working to help those most in need. Among other efforts, Gates is now urging leaders to put women at the center of the COVID-19 response to address what she calls a child care crisis. ABC News Live's anchor Lindsay Davis sat down with her to talk about the initiative.
If COVID-19 were a person, it would be a bigot. This virus has a penchant for discriminating by race, age, and gender.
Well, it's created a crisis for women.
Melinda Gates is pushing back on all fronts.
We're seeing women leave the workforce in droves, even compared to men. And a lot of it has to do with the types of jobs women are in, but also the caregiving that women do for children and the elderly.
According to the United Nations, the coronavirus pandemic has driven 47 million women out of the workforce.
And what is the issue with the jobs that women tend to have? Why are they more impacted in times of crisis like this?
Well, because women often have those jobs in hospitality or in the essential worker types of roles, but those are very fragile jobs in our economy. And so if you particularly are a low-income woman and you have no one who can take care of your children, not a sister, not a grandmother, not a husband, wow, how can you go and get on the bus and keep your job? And then as well, as we know, we've lost a lot of service and hospitality jobs in this recession.
The former general manager at Microsoft turned billionaire philanthropist and co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has spent decades and more than $54 billion fighting the various ailments of this planet, from poverty to climate change and most recently, COVID.
The Gates Foundation to date has given about $1.75 billion, I believe, to the COVID response. This latest $250 million donation has been specifically earmarked to equality when it comes to making sure that everyone is able to get access to the vaccine. How specifically do we go about achieving that?
Well, we make sure that the tools we know that work, the tests, the treatments, the vaccines, that they get out to all countries, not just high-income countries in like the United States or in Europe. You know, think if you're an essential healthcare worker and you're working in a country in Africa and you're still going to your job in the healthcare sector. Maybe you're delivering babies, but you have no access to a vaccine. That makes absolutely no sense as we're distributing them more widely, for instance, in the United States.
And how does that impact us globally if the least of these are not getting that same equity when it comes to vaccine distribution?
Well, first of all, there's obviously the moral argument. It's the right thing to do that we protect all healthcare workers first and all vulnerable populations. But economically, we're going to have a much slower recovery in our own country. Travel's not going to go back to the way it was, whether it's leisure or business travel. You're not going to get our manufacturing and supply chains fully running if you have these variants that are going to crop up more and more in these places that aren't vaccinated, and then that's going to bounce back into our own country. And we're going to continue to ride this wave of this pandemic.
Her husband, Bill Gates, recently shared with me that getting shots into developing countries will be the only way to end the pandemic.
Well, there are many countries that have no vaccine factories at all, and it doesn't make any sense that their citizens wouldn't get any protection. After all, we want to end the disease everywhere, so we're not constantly having these reinfections.
And let's talk about vaccine equality closer to home. Of course, as you well know, the COVID in general has disproportionately impacted Black and brown communities, not just with suffering, but with death, and now with access to the vaccine. What do we do to change that?
You take the vaccinations to their neighborhoods and set up a place there for them to come so they don't have to get on a bus or drive their car 30 miles across the city to go get access to vaccination.
Gates says we could reach global herd immunity from COVID sometime next year, and many medical experts agree.
You and your husband had a focus way before many others on the idea that a pandemic could hit. Is this what you expected, projected? Is it worse?
We never imagined that country after country would go through these ripples of these lockdowns and the economic destruction that would happen. So I'd say we predicted some pieces of it, but we certainly didn't predict the scope and scale and magnitude of the economic devastation and the impact of that on families, not just the pandemic itself.
The impact is especially hard on women. Women's jobs are nearly twice as vulnerable in a crisis than men's jobs.
And you're now asking leaders to put women right in the center of the COVID-19 response. Why women in particular?
When you look at all the jobs lost in the United States last year, 275,000 jobs were lost by women, 71,000 by men. And so this disproportionate effect, we could have a whole generation of women who leave the workforce, and then if we don't deal with the caregiving crisis we've got, they may never go back.
I want to quote for a moment here. In the Washington Post, you wrote, "The caregiving system in the United States is broken, and it is women who are paying the price." You went on to ask President Biden to appoint a caregiving czar. Why?
Because I think we need to coordinate our government's efforts across a number of agencies. But there are absolutely things this government can and should do to, one, make sure that the child care sector doesn't collapse, and number two, to make sure that we have the right long-term policies for paid family medical leave.
What are the steps that you feel that world leaders need to take in order to lift women up?
I feel like they need to look at caregiving in their country for sure. They need to look at the harassment and abuse in their country, because that is one of the things that holds women back at home and in their job. And they need to look at investing in women-led businesses, whether that's a tech business or whether that's a woman's vegetable stand in a low-income country. Women have a harder time getting access to capital.
And for decades now, you and your husband have really been putting your money where your mouth is and trying to solve these global issues. And I'm curious, because you have this acute awareness and knowledge about what the big threats are, when you look at the next 10 years, the next 20 years going forward, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future?
I'm optimistic. I think if we use this opportunity coming out of the pandemic to very swiftly change some of the policies, like in the United States, paid family medical leave. You know, these gaps and cracks have been in society, these inequities, but now they're in our face. So if we build back in the right way with the right policies, and we build back right now, and we start with a surveillance system, we're going to have a better world where you're not going to get these pandemics that rush from country to country. We'll be able to contain them and control them more quickly where they are.
And when it comes to, if it's equality or pandemic or climate change, is there some kind of a global threat in particular that keeps you up at night? Is there something that you're acutely concerned about?
I'm acutely concerned about whether global leaders will take this moment in gender equality and take it very, very seriously and realize that they need to make these investments now. But it keeps me up at night. You know, are we going to use this pandemic for the better, on behalf of women, so we build back in the right way? Or are we going to kind of just put some Band-Aids on it and then move forward and say, oh, we fixed it, when we really didn't?
And lastly, if your microphone right now were to be able to serve as a megaphone to world leaders, what would your message be directly to them?
My message to them directly would be, women are the backbone of your society. They take care of your children. They take care of everybody else. When you invest in them, they invest in the entire community, and they lift up not just their family and the community, but they lift up your economy. You want them in the workforce, so you support them, and you're going to get the economic recovery and the returns that you want.
In 2015, she launched Pivotal Ventures, a company focused on removing barriers for women in the United States. She is a global benefactor who, for decades, has affected change with money. Now she's also spending a different kind of currency, using her voice, calling for more female leaders. One of her goals for 2021 is that it will be a turning point for gender equality.
I think it's time for the world to have more female leaders in all positions of power, because we know it makes a difference when a young girl or young boy can look up and say, I don't want to be like that leader, but wow, there's 6 other female leaders and I want to be like those 6. You know, you can't be what you can't see. And I think female leadership makes an important makes just important choices for society as a whole in a different way, because of the way women see society. Having women and people of color in positions of power makes a difference for society.
Our thanks to Lindsay and Melinda Gates for that interview. And as more and more vaccination sites open up across the country, more are ending up with leftover doses at the end of the day. So what happens to those extra shots? Well, the organization Dr. B is now working to match them to people willing to get vaccinated at a moment's notice. More than 500,000 people have already signed up, and we're lucky to have the founder of Dr. B, Cyrus Masumi, here to tell us more about it. Cyrus, thanks so much for joining us. First off, why the name Dr. B, and how exactly does the system work?
So the etymology of the name comes from my grandfather, who became a physician during the Spanish flu, the last global pandemic. And he dedicated his career to closing gaps between patients and care, which is exactly what Dr. B is trying to do. And so we thought it would be an appropriate hat tip to him. In terms of what we do and how it works, so Dr. B is a universal nationwide standby list for the COVID-19 vaccine. Any patient can go to hidrb.com and register. They fill out basic information that their government requires for their vaccine priority list. And any provider that wants to use it simply indicates if they have excess doses, how many doses they have, and what time they're expiring. And our system will do all the work to figure out exactly who to notify at the appropriate local government priority criteria, and effectively making sure that every single dose is claimed and spoken for, and optimizing to make sure that not only are they claimed and spoken for, but they're done so at the appropriate priority levels.
And how often does this happen? How often are vaccine providers ending up with extra doses at the end of the day?
It's quite frequent, and the reason being is that patients cancel or no-show on their vaccine appointments 20 to 30% of the time. Part of the reason for that is that the vaccine's in such short supply that people are booking multiple appointments at multiple providers and they're not canceling them. And that's resulting in a very complicated operational challenge for all these to add sort of additional operational challenges on top of what the vaccine providers need to do. And so we're really just trying to make a tool that at least simplifies one part of this whole process for them.
And I know you've taken several steps to ensure that the service will be equitable. Tell us about some of those efforts and why that's so important to you.
Sure. So earlier in this program, I was listening to discussions of vaccine hesitancy. As we know, and was indicated there, members of the Black, Brown, Native, Hispanic communities have had not just more negative impact from COVID, but they're also the same communities that we've seen a lot of vaccine hesitancy in. And the problem is that as these communities are more receptive to getting the vaccine, they're seeing their friends get the vaccine, and ultimately they become open to it. They then, a 1A or a 1B in some of the more vulnerable communities would then have to compete for an appointment with a 1D, 1E, or a 2 in sort of the rest of society, who can hit refresh 1,000 times a second and grab that open appointment. The benefits of a queuing-based model is that you can continually and in perpetuity prioritize the 1As over the 1Bs over the 1Cs, and you can do that forever. So someone who was previously vaccine hesitant that's in a high priority care category, as soon as they indicate that they want to get the vaccine, they immediately go to the front of the line. And so we think that it's a small way to help rectify some of the inequities and some of the hesitancy that's been systemic in this pandemic. And
so where is the service available, and how do you sign up?
So anyone, anywhere in the United States can sign up. We have rolled out with sites in Arkansas and New York State. We're trying to roll out to all 50 states as quickly as possible. We have providers coming to us. Over 30 states now have providers have come to us, and we literally are turning new states live every few days. So we encourage people to get signed up, to be on the platform, and we will notify you as soon as there's vaccines available.
All right, Cyrus Masumi with Dr. B. We are grateful to you. We're grateful to the original Dr. B, your grandfather, for all of his service, and so glad to see you following in his footsteps. Thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
And that does it for this ABC News Live update. I'm Diane Macedo. Remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. I'll see you back here at 3 p.m. Eastern with Terry Moran for The Breakdown.
We still plan to celebrate these amazing beings, our closest living relatives, the chimpanzees, and in particular the chimpanzees of Gombe. What a lot they've taught us. They're still teaching us.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.